How Saudi Arabia bought the 2034 World Cup. In 2022, FIFA took the World Cup to the Middle East for the first time ever, and just 3 editions later, we will be back there. That is not common at all. Outside of Europe and South America, FIFA doesn't usually give a confederation the rights to host the World Cup that many times in only a few years. The World Cup first went to America in 1970, and it didn't return there until 1986, a full 16 years later. It first went to Asia in 2002 and didn't return until 2022, 20 years later. It first went to Africa in 2010 and won't be returning until 2030, again, another 20 years later. And in fact, in this case, Morocco will be hosting alongside 5 other countries, so does it really even count? Anyways, I say all of this just to show you how uncommon what we're seeing is. But do you know why it has happened? Well, because Saudi Arabia bought the 2034 World Cup, and I'll tell you just how in this video today. You see, for years now, there's been talk about how countries in the Middle East have been trying to use football as a sports washing tool. It was one of the main talking points ahead of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. And seeing as we'll be returning there so soon, it's hard not to think about that again. Especially with FIFA breaking a lot of its own rules to award Saudi Arabia hosting rights for the 2034 tournament against all odds. So what are some of the rules that FIFA has broken here? First of all, FIFA sped up the bidding timeline, and they sped up significantly. By 2023, we already knew who would be hosting a World Cup that was 11 years away. This is not common at all. This time around, FIFA sped up the timeline by nothing less than 3 years, making it difficult, in fact, nearly impossible for other nations to put in meaningful bids that would actually compete with Saudi Arabia. But even that's just the beginning. The New York Times reported that FIFA President Gianni Infantino was key to Saudi Arabia winning hosting rights for the 2034 showdown. Again, this is not very common. Apparently, he was actively involved in private diplomacy on behalf of the Middle Eastern country. He first tried to see if Greece would be willing to team up with Saudi to host the 2030 edition, but when Spain, Portugal, and Morocco announced that they would be bidding for the 2030 edition together, Saudi Arabia decided to back out because they knew the likelihood that they would win a bid against a combination of those 3 nations was very low. But the thing is, with Portugal, Spain, and Morocco hosting 2030 together, and the US, Canada, and Mexico hosting in 2026, it meant that only North America, Africa, and Europe would have been disqualified from bidding for 2034. Asia, South America, and Oceania could still bid. And with South America, you still got some real powerhouses like Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina who could be a threat to Saudi Arabia's hosting ambitions. So what did FIFA do? Well, you won't believe this. Football's governing body made the strangest decision we have ever seen. They ruled that the first 3 games of the 2030 World Cup will be played in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Their explanation was that this was to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the FIFA World Cup. Seeing as Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay all partook in the first ever World Cup in 1930, it might make sense to you. But what you may not know is that there's a hidden agenda. In actuality, FIFA's intention was rather sinister. By asking those 3 South American nations to host just 3 games of the 2030 tournament, it effectively ruled out South America from the 2034 hosting conversations, pretty much giving Saudi Arabia a free run to winning the hosting rights. Only countries from Asia and Oceania could bid for the hosting rights of the 2034 World Cup, and seeing as Saudi Arabia were the only ones ready at the time, they were pretty much going to win the bid uncontested. But you see, FIFA still wasn't satisfied with that. They wanted to make extra sure that only Saudi Arabia could win the bid. So what did they do? Like I said earlier, the entire process was sped up. They gave just 25 days to interested nations to express their desire to host the tournament. And Saudi Arabia made their intentions known in just a matter of minutes. And here's the thing. FIFA certainly knew that Saudi Arabia were ready. After all, they had earlier shown interest in hosting the 2030 edition, so they were certainly going to be ready for 2034, and FIFA knew that. So knowing that Saudi would be ready, all they wanted to do was make sure that nobody else was, which was why they hurried up and closed the whole thing. The bidding process for the rights to host the 2034 edition of the World Cup started in October 2023, and in that same month, Infantino announced that Saudi Arabia would be hosts come 2034. This was later confirmed in December of 2024. But even with all the crazy stuff I've said so far, there's still more, and no, I'm not joking, stay with me. So you see, at first, FIFA used the same requirements for the 2030 World Cup for the bidding process of the 2034 edition, but in no time, it was changed. So for the biddings for 2030, FIFA required that potential host nations have at least 7 stadiums with a minimum capacity of 40,000. They carried those same requirements over to the biddings for 2034, but shortly after, they reduced that number, requiring potential hosts to have just 4 stadiums with a minimum capacity of 40,000. All these curious decisions have made people question the legitimacy of Saudi Arabia's entire bidding process. Mind you, all of this is happening despite fans and players having not fully recovered from the last time the World Cup went to the Middle East. If you can remember, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar had to be held in November and December because of the weather in that part of the world. You know, with it getting super hot in the summer, which made the customary summer schedule impractical. And with how similar the weather in Qatar and Saudi Arabia are, it is very likely that the case will be the same with Saudi Arabia in 2034. In 2022, that timing affected the regular European season, and not many were too happy about it. So it is a bit interesting that FIFA is willing to go back to that just 12 years after. But here's the thing, if the World Cup is held that time of year, it could affect a lot, notably breaking up the season for most of the players who will be at the tournament. First of all, Saudi Arabia are scheduled to host the 2034 Asian Games in November and December. So would that clash with the World Cup in the same country? Also, there's a possibility that scheduling could clash with the 2034 Winter Olympics. Yes, the IOC has said that they don't see a risk of the schedules clashing, but it still brings up questions, doesn't it? There's also the big one of Ramadan, which will probably fall in December that year. With Saudi Arabia being a prominently Muslim country, will it really be possible for the World Cup to be held during Ramadan? All of these many issues with scheduling alone should have made it a little more difficult for Saudi Arabia to win the bid. Against worthy opponents, they almost certainly would have not won. But FIFA made sure to take out every obstacle to make sure they did win. It just makes you wonder, you know? It also makes you wonder when FIFA made sure to grant Saudi these rights, despite pressure from organizations all around the world to make sure the country doesn't host the World Cup because of human rights concerns. Building and Woodworkers International said that Saudi Arabia hosting the World Cup goes against their conditions for human rights. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International both criticized human rights in the country. ITUC Africa even filed a complaint to the UN over the mistreatment of African workers in Saudi Arabia, and they expressed their concerns that the country winning the rights to host the World Cup could make things worse. Even Fossil Free Football have expressed concerns over how much environmental pollution building new stadiums will cause. Everybody seemed to be fighting against Saudi Arabia hosting the World Cup, but they had FIFA in their pockets, so none of that really mattered. Now listen, I'm not categorically accusing FIFA of anything here. I mean, nothing has been proven yet. But come on, all of this seems suspicious, doesn't it? I mean, there seems to be a lot of reasons why Saudi Arabia should not be hosting the 2034 World Cup, but FIFA appears to have bent backwards to make sure they did against all odds. You have to ask yourself why. Why did FIFA do that? If we're being very honest here, everything seems to point to foul play having happened behind the scenes with this one, and this is not good for the integrity of the sport. What do you think though? Do you think that Saudi Arabia bought the 2034 World Cup? Are you excited about the biggest football tournament heading back to the Middle East so soon? Do you think that maybe FIFA is corrupt? Guys, get in the comment section down below and talk to me. And while you're there, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you stay locked into more football content like this.